Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going on vacation with a bit of help from Concord and Ninth in the Plain Amazing bundle. I've actually had this card completed for about a month and a half or so now. I actually created it the weekend that the Barbie movie came out, and I'm finally getting around to posting it now. And this is such a fun bundle to play with because you can either create a plane where you see one large plane window or you see four, and the four plane option is actually an interactive piece. It allows you to slide the shades up and down, which is really cool. And then there's a good variety of sentiments in the stamp set as well, and little stamps to create scenes in the window slider piece. So as I said, I was very much inspired by Barbie for this card, and as you can tell by my nails. So I am choosing Carnation and Sweet Pea cardstocks to build the two panels that are closest to me. I guess more of the interior of the plane. I'm building those out of that, and then the inner portion of the window I'm going to build out of Aqua Sky and Oceanside cardstocks. It's going to be a very vibrant, colorful card. So I've got my two pieces of Sweet Pea and Carnation cardstocks here, cut down to A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm lining up the largest rounded arch die to make that window. And I chose to do this on the Carnation cardstock because it won't be as, aggressive, because Sweet Pea is a little bit more aggressive in color, so it's kind of a little bit more toned down. And so I'm trying to figure out my placement here because I really want to use the Adventure Awaits sentiment. So I'm trying to see if I have space to stamp that down on the bottom or how I can move things around to get it to work. I settled on a placement here for the window, so I'm just going to tape that down and run that through my die cut machine. And I would say that this step is probably the most, difficult, you could say, when it comes to making this card, because it's really easy once you have this window cut out. Everything just falls into place seamlessly. But just getting that one lined up and making sure it's straight and all that, for me, takes a bit of time because I'm a perfectionist with that. So it slows me down quite a bit. So like I said, you can just line that up with the next piece of cardstock. So in this case, the Sweet Pea one. And I'm going for the second largest oval, and I'm just going to line that up in that gap. It's really easy to do. I'm just securing my cardstock a little bit with some magnets on my glass mat, just so things don't slip around so much. But I'm just popping that in place. And once that's how I like it, I just tape it down, take the Carnation piece off, and then run the Sweet Pea one through my die cut machine. And there you go. Now you can see we have two little panels there making part of this window. It's looking good. So just like how I did with my pinks, I'm making my largest of the blue ovals or frames. I don't know what you want to call it. I'm making that out of Aqua Sky, so it's not super impactful, I guess, because the Oceanside, packs a bit of a punch, and Oceanside and Sweet Pea together would be very vibrant. So this kind of allows me to transition a little bit to those colors. So I line that up in the little opening there, and I die cut that, and I'm stacking all my papers together so that I can line up the last window. And so I'm just gonna pop that into place and tape it down and run it through my die cut machine. And there we go. There are all four panels together. I really like how it looks. I like that the darker colors are more on the interior of each. I think it's pretty cool. And so now I'm getting the rest of my little pieces to die cut. I have the shade out of Oceanside and Aqua Sky, the palm tree trunk out of Wheat, and then I decided on ivory cardstock for the sand, but don't worry, it's not going to stay ivory for long. And then I decided on some parsley cardstock for the leaves of the palm tree. For the sky, I ended up deciding to die cut everything, like to build my scene off of the smallest oval since it pops right into that little window there. I thought that would be the easiest thing to do, so I had that die cut and ready to go. And so now I'm just kind of eyeballing the placement of this shade because I wasn't quite sure how much space it was going to eat up on the scene. It ended up really not taking up that much space at all. So it was really helpful to look at this prior to starting. So now for the water, I wasn't sure what color to use because I thought Aqua Sky would be way too similar to the window, so I was concerned about that. So I ended up actually ink smushing some Aqua Sky ink on Aqua Sky cardstock to make a little bit of a darker but tropical blue. So I die cut that with the little wave die, and then I'm die cutting it with the smaller oval because I forgot it was the larger oval that I had die cut it out of. So with that placed there, I kind of started second guessing my color choice for a little bit. I wasn't sure if there was enough difference between the Aqua Sky and the Oceanside pieces because I thought it basically looked like Aqua Sky and Oceanside had a baby. So I ink smushed some Oceanside ink on Oceanside cardstock, but that to me was just too dark for water. It kind of pulled more like juniper. I pulled out some white cardstock and ink smushed some Aqua Sky ink on it, but then of course that was way too similar to the original Aqua Sky cardstock. And then I pulled out Tide Pool, but then to me the tones, they were just off. It's like you had some powder, which is a true blue, and then Tide Pool, which is like a muddy blue, mixed with the vibrant blues, just wasn't it. Same with Harbor. And then for some reason, I pulled out Blueberry cardstock, which is the exact opposite of Tropical Waters. And so I chucked that out of the way. And I ended up deciding on my original ink smushed Aqua Sky cardstock. I also have my islands, and I'm just kind of getting the idea of placement here, trying to figure out how I'm going to build this scene. So I'm just laying everything out just so I can kind of eyeball it. And I decided that I wanted to use the little heart contrail and the little plane in my scene. I thought it was really cute, so I wanted to include that. And I ended up die cutting a sun and then another island out of that same ivory cardstock. And I ended up also die cutting some clouds out of some white cardstock as well. I thought about using the enamel dots here, but since my scene was kind of starting to overlap my little oval, I decided against it. So I'm just kind of playing with placement here, trying to figure out what I like. And then this was basically what I settled on here. I thought this looked pretty balanced. So now was the time to make my islands look like islands. So I pulled out some Latte Positively Saturated ink from Simon Says Stamp and my Mini Misty, which has my A2 size grip mat in it. And so I'm just sticking the little islands onto the Mini Misty there, and I'm going to blend on this ink. And I really like this ink because it's such a good, warm, light brown that I thought I could, add the way that I blended the ink on, I could make it look a little bit more dimensional, a little bit more sandy. So I just added some ink onto those islands to get them to look like sand. And then at this point, I started assembling my frames. So I'm gluing my two pink frames together. And then I'm also going to glue the blue frames together just to kind of get things a little bit more in a controlled state, get everything put together. So now those are a little bit more manageable to deal with as I'm playing around with placements and stuff. And I'm also gluing the handle onto the little window shade. So I'm just going to assemble my little scene here with some liquid glue. And it's actually pretty funny that I'm really drawn to this die set because I have only flown once in my life. And it was actually just after my husband and I were freshly married. It was a month after we were married, and we moved from our home state of Michigan all the way out to Seattle, which, was a big change because we were navigating marriage and, being full-fledged adults because we had recently graduated from college. So it's just funny to me. I'm not a fan of planes, but I'm a big fan of this die set. And at this point, I was again trying to figure out my cloud placement here. I wanted things to feel balanced. I didn't think two clouds got me the feeling that I wanted. And so what I'm kind of showing you here is, like a lot of other designers like to do, I like to work in thirds, and especially with these clouds, So I'm just playing around, and I put the largest cloud underneath the palm tree here, but I'm not a fan of how it looks. It looks too big. So I put the medium-sized cloud there, and I had the large one at the top here. It was hidden by the shade a bit too much for my liking. So I ended up die cutting a smaller one. So there are actually two smaller clouds on this card and then one medium-sized one. But I like how this scene felt a bit more balanced this way. So I'm just gonna sneak the fine tip of my glue bottle behind my elements and kind of get them stuck in place. And the other thing that I noticed when I was editing this card, or I guess the other thing I thought about while editing, was the fact that this die set could really be used for a lot of different occasions. Like you might think, oh, it's a plane, like what are you going to use it for? It's so limited. But not really. You can use it for a card, that you're sending to somebody that just visited you and you miss. You can send it to a couple who's just gotten married and going on their honeymoon. This card would work for that. It'd be pretty good. It's a tropical location. Adventure is coming, in the way of marriage and life and, an awesome tropical vacation. But it also would be great for somebody who's moving across the country, maybe studying abroad or taking a really, long vacation. Maybe they're backpacking through Europe or something like that. I think there are a lot more uses for this die set than one might think, on first glance. But yeah, so I thought about that. And so now I have the little shade glued on the back of my pink panels here. And then I'm just going to finish gluing down my little sky and cloud elements. And it's funny because I actually really got inspired to make this card because I had a Barbie plane when I was growing up. But after I had made this card, I looked up what it looked like because for some reason in my head, I was like, oh, it's definitely blue and pink and fun. But no, my Barbie plane looked more, I think it was like a powder blue with like very light pink accents, like light pink wings and stuff like that on the inside. So if I were to make this true to how I had it, it would definitely be powder and ballet slipper cardstocks. But I'm really happy with the colors I chose here. It's a lot more vibrant and fun for sure. So now that I have everything glued down, I can trim around the little oval to snip everything off that's hanging over my scene. It's very easy to follow this curve, which I'm happy about. So now I've got that trimmed down and I'm just looking at everything again. I really like how it's coming together. So I'm pulling out my card base and attaching the blue panel. And really, I should have done this from the start. It would have made things so much easier instead of just laying it out and struggling. But I'm not always thinking that far ahead when I'm crafting. So I've got that glued down. And the one thing that I do want to point out here is if you build your scene like I did, you want to make sure to glue your little scene down now before your top panel piece if you have the shade glued on it already, because if you don't glue it down, you won't get it in. I don't think you could really squeeze the paper underneath it. So just keep that in mind when you're assembling. So I'm just slathering some liquid glue all on the back of that pink panel and popping that down. And we're ready to move on to the sentiment. All right, so I've got my mini Misty out again, and I have that adventure awaits sentiment, and I'm going to stamp it on some black cardstock. I decided just to go with a kind of sentiment banner look to it. And I'm lining it up near the bottom edge of my cardstock here because I know that that is a straight line. And when I have to kind of freehand cut banners or sentiments, I always feel like I'm not getting things straight. So it's a more of a advantage that I'm trying to give myself to achieve that. So I am powdering up with some anti-static powder and inking that stamp up with Versamark ink. And then I'm going to stamp it down, and then I'm going to coat that in some alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. And then I'm going to clear off any extra powder that's around the greeting and heat emboss it. And after heat embossing, I noticed that there were some like dips and imperfections in my sentiment. So I ended up pulling out my white gel pen just to fill those in because it was kind of bugging me a little bit, but it wasn't a big deal. You definitely didn't have to do that. But I did it because I'm a perfectionist. The little perfectionist in me didn't want it. So originally I had thought about making kind of like a slanted banner here, just having like one, I guess you would call it, tail coming down at an angle. So I traced a line with a pencil and a ruler. And at this point, I wasn't sure if I liked it, so I pulled out some sentiment banners that I had from Lawn Fawn, thinking that the one I had was big enough for it, but it wasn't. So I kind of drew my own. I ended up drawing a line from the edge of the slanted line that I had, so a straight line up on the cardstock, and then I ended up drawing, finding the midpoint, and then just drawing a line from the other edge to the middle, which I'm sorry if that doesn't make sense. Words are not my strong suit today. But I trimmed that off and then erased any leftover pencil ink on the cardstock, trimmed down the one side a little bit, and then now I'm figuring out my placement for where I want the sentiment. And I'm just going to go in this kind of bottom right corner. And sorry, my head gets in the way there. And so now that I have it figured out, I'm realizing that I need some thin foam squares on part of it to give it a little bit of support and stability. So I have thin foam squares, and then I also have some cardstock that I'm putting on the right edge of it so that it's kind of, it makes it even across the sentiment. So it's more flush, I guess. I don't know. Just so that things sit straight and flat, or as flat as possible, and everything is supported. So I popped that down, made sure it's straight, and that wraps up this card. I thought about adding some bling to it, but decided against it. But as you can see, there's not a lot of bulk here. It's not going to be a problem to get this card through the mail, which is always a bonus. I'm really happy with how it turned out and how vibrant and colorful it is, and it's very Barbie. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a like and subscribe to follow along for more.